Welcome back to the Discovering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We have Shaun Riney, Senior Managing Director at Marcus Millichap and partner of leading investment sales team, the New York Multifamily, here with us today. Shaun, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you again for doing this.
Thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate this
Of
and
course.
looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. So before we talk business, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. So where are you from and how did you get into the industry?
So, raised in Detroit, Michigan, small farm, 5 acres, horses and goats outside of Detroit, Michigan. So, I was raised in Michigan, Michigan boy. Ended up going to school in Boston University, which was home for 4 years. That's where I actually got, my start in real estate and get into that story. But originally from Michigan, by way of Boston, New York City now since 2008, so 14 years.
So how did you transition? Where did you first get your real estate exposure in college?
So I went to Boston University, which is the best thing that could ever happen to me. I was from kind of honky tonk land,
Right.
bonfires, and, I'd come back and get in fist fights all the time and stuff like that. But getting into Boston University, I got exposure to, a lot of different types of wealth demographics, and it really got the whole keep up with the Joneses,
Right.
going in my brain, which was the perfect thing that I needed to kind of clean up my act. I rented my first off-campus apartment my sophomore year of college. And I
Mhm.
remember that day, just going and looking at three quote unquote just shitholes.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, it's like a salmon swimming upstream at the end of 4 years in Boston. Everyone has to have an apartment by September 1st. Generally speaking, you don't live in Boston during the summer.
Right. Yeah.
So everyone comes with their parents. July, August, and you all have to get an apartment on September 1st. So it's like shooting fish in a barrel for a rental broker.
Right.
And so I saw 3 apartments that day. I had to choose between 3 awful apartments and pay a 1-month rental fee. And I saw that I just thought like this is the easiest money I've ever seen anybody make in my life. And so basically the week after I paid that $3,200 1-month rental fee for a 4-bedroom on Alston Terrace behind the Super 88, if you're in Boston and know where that is, I started working at that company. At the same time, I started a fraternity, a Pike chapter, Pi Kappa Alpha, my sophomore year, and basically made all the fraternity kids rent apartments for me. So that
Right.
became the base of a very good rental business. And then I got really good at Boston, just kind of rentals. So I got my taste of the action in Boston, just renting apartments. Much shorter compensation cycle than investment sales
Yeah.
broker. I have to wait a lot longer
Way
for my
shorter.
money now, but I was really good at what I did. I think my junior year of college, I made like $140,000,
Wow.
and I was still getting my tuition paid for by my parents. I was still getting a tuition,
Wow.
and I spent all of it.
Wow.
So that next April, I had to have a call with my dad. I said, "Are you sitting down?" I was like, "I
It's all
need a
gone.
little bit of a loan. 35, 40 grand. I don't have anything and I owe the government money." Because I just thought, I don't know, I didn't know what I thought, but I was 1099, so I didn't pay any taxes that
Mhm.
entire way. So he flipped out, but I paid him back every cent.
Okay, great. And what do you think you'd be doing career-wise if not commercial real estate?
Well, I went to school for government. And I still think maybe I end up there in some capacity. Still have an interest in public policy, but kind of, wanted to get somewhere a little bit further. I knew that you kind of had to have a little bit of money to have some
Yeah.
influence. So, if somehow I can marry my other passion for, green technology and the environment, whether it's just in buildings and somehow coalesce those two things, I think I could do that job pretty well. I could be a lobbyist in some capacity
Awesome.
pretty well. But honestly, I haven't thought of that question very often.
Got it. Understood. And I want to ask, so you've closed on over 600 buildings in New York City. Which deal kind of stands out to you that you'll never forget?
The first one, I remember shaking like a leaf at the closing table, 1102 Eastern Parkway. I brought the buy side. Client Chaim Simkowitz bought it, Guardian Realty. Great client, great guy. And that was in 2009.
Okay.
So every deal counted. I mean, it was just the apocalypse. And I remember I went to the closing table and it was a distress sale. Probably shouldn't have went to the closing table because they tried to cut the fee at the table, and my heart's just pumping out of my chest. I'm like, I just wanted this thing closed. Like now you got these older attorneys coming after my fee. I'm like a 23-year-old.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I got here. So that one stands out. The portfolio sale that we executed for ZT Realty. for 76 million stands out because I had sold a number of those buildings to them. So it was just great to go end-to-end execution, help build a portfolio, and then help, execute a massive, all-in-one sale. So those two stand out, although
Great.
they're all memorable. But I learned very early on from JD Parker, one of my mentors, that you're always 2 deals away from being happy. So
Right.
I'm always thinking about the next 2 deals, and I'm always unsatisfied until I get those next 2 deals. It's hard to kind of look in the past.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's the broker's curse.
Yeah,
Always
for
2
sure.
deals away from being happy.
And what does your typical day look like as an investment sales broker? Is it structured, or is every day kind of like a different story?
It's structured to a certain extent. I mean, I try to wake up early, beat the sun up. That's key. So I was working out today at 5:30, 6 a.m. Mostly not just even for my body, but just to get my mind going. Get in early, try to respond to all emails, try to get my proactive emails out the door so that I ideally can be meeting with clients or on the phone with clients during the day. So, our general cadence Monday through Friday is Monday prep, organize, like kind of provide the team direction for the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, don't get in my way. Like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is horse blinders. Like that's meeting with clients, on the phone with clients, no distractions, no diligence, no doing BOVs for the next week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are our selling days. And those are the days I try to block out all admin related things, all training things, all organizational things, and just sell what we have. I mean, even people that ask me for what is my property worth on a Tuesday? I'm like, next Tuesday we'll get to you, because we do all that on Fridays and Mondays. So Mondays organize, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday execute, Friday wrap up and plan for the week ahead.
Understood.
Yeah.
And I watched a video where you said that curiosity leads to obsession, and obsession leads to money and success. Could you describe to us the importance of becoming obsessed with your business and how that kind of leads to results?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a little bit borrowed from, Tony Robbins, who I'm just, absolutely over the moon for. He's impacted my life in a lot of ways. But he always used to ask this question: is it more fun to be a fan, or is it more fun to be a raving fan?
Right.
If you like the Pittsburgh Steelers, is it more fun to just enjoy the Steelers every Sunday, or to know every player, where they went to school? It's more fun to be a raving fan.
Right.
So just be a raving fan of real estate, and then it becomes a lot more fun. You get better at it. So take a real curious interest in things, and all of a sudden you start to really hone in on the details. It gets more fun and you get obsessed with it. So, I mean, still late at night, I'm property sharking at 10, 11 o'clock, clicking on, tax lots, seeing who owns what, trying to figure out how to do the next assemblage. It's a game. I mean, in New York City, real estate is the 5th sport.
Right.
We got the 4 major food groups, and then we got number 5, real estate.
Yeah.
So.
And what initially sparked your curiosity back when you started?
It was just, it was just how to make money. So, a lot of what you're doing right now is so smart, because your clients are your professors of the business. So when I go on meetings, part of, a learning curve is just being humble enough to ask questions.
Right.
Ultimately at the end of the day, I'm just making a marriage in a relationship, but I do need to understand the real estate along the way. So, when I meet with somebody, it's, one, doing the work about how they got to where they got. What do they own? Not only what do they own, but like, let's look at a property on Patchen Avenue. They bought it in 2006 for $600,000. You can see that they renovated. 3 years later, they refinanced for 1.1. Okay, what did they grow the NOI to in order to be able to pull out all their money and basically own this building for free? So you start reverse engineering all the math behind every trade. You start to understand, and then ask questions. You start to understand, like, this is how people are actually making money and building wealth. This is how you get from where I am brokering the deal to being on the other side of principal ownership and basically having this massive cash flow moat around your castle, which is the ultimate dream.
So you kind of fell in love with this idea of helping people get to their financial security place.
Yeah. Or help solve problems.
Right.
A lot of times it's either helping them grow or helping them kind of realize that they've already grown and to enjoy some of it.
Right.
So it depends on where you're at. A lot of our work is transitional real estate. So what I mean by that is, we'll sell a heavy rent regulated apartment building for somebody that's in their, late 50s, early 60s. They shouldn't be running around self-managing this at this point, and transition them into something that makes equal or greater net income, like a net lease property.
Turnkey.
Yeah, that maybe you give up some of the appreciation, but what would you rather have?
Right.
And this is the question that I actually asked them. I say, let's just give you a bet that this apartment building at $10 million goes up in value $500,000 a year.
Right.
That $10 million reinvested at 5% is $500,000 in actual income a year. So even if I grant you that this apartment building, you're giving up appreciation of $500,000 a year, if you're swapping into this corporate grade JP Morgan Chase, retail that's making you $500,000 a year, you're in the same place, but the difference is you can actually eat the $500,000 in cash flow every year versus the pie in the sky appreciation.
Yeah.
So once you get people into that mindset, if they've lost the passion for the underlying real estate, get rid of it, because you're not going to grow where your attention's not. And if you're not excited about the property, you should probably find another property to swap into. We have a great thing called 1031 exchange. You lose a little bit on the transaction cost, but you can gain a lot also.
Right. That makes sense. And as far as your business of brokerage, what are some of your kind of unconventional ways to generate leads for yourself?
Meeting people like you. Social media has definitely started to impact some of the lead gen, networking events. Honestly, just doing the right job for people. Integrity is something that takes a long time to build.
Right.
Can take 2 seconds to break. So, you just want to try to, conduct yourself with integrity, and that becomes tricky as a broker, very tricky, especially when you're having to give people disappointing news all the time. But eventually, if you lead yourself with integrity, and the one thing is stay in the same seat or not be forgotten is what I like to call it. I think the biggest business I've ever lost is not from a competitor in the marketplace. It's not from, anything other than simply being forgotten. So I've lost more money to simply being forgot for all the seeds that I planted in the field and watered or then stopped watering. But if I simply wasn't forgotten, I'd be 5 times what I'm worth today.
So watering them is kind of like a lifelong journey.
Well, you start at Marcus, and JD Parker mentioned this. You plant 50 seeds in a field, and that's year 1, and then another 50 or 60, and then another 50 or 60. But you can't just plant them. You got to water them. Yeah. You have to till the dirt. You have to do all these things. So if you're not doing those things, which is very easy to not do, you're forgot. And as soon as you're forgotten, it's not like, you have nothing to blame for yourself. You did all the hard work of getting there, but you didn't maintain.
Got it. Understood. And what mistakes do you see other investment sales brokers making that you think may be holding them back in their career?
One, not playing the long game. That is first and foremost why everybody exits. I did a video on this one time called the danger zone.
Yeah.
And it was just basically this red line between month 12 and 24 where you're like, I should be making something, or I should be like getting there. But then you have a couple defeats and you start looking in limbo. And as soon as you start looking sideways, that's where you go sideways. And if you can make it to month, 36 plus, that's usually the green zone when what you're doing actually starts to work. Those seeds that we just mentioned start to flower. Right. But people get really trapped up in that 12 to 24 month, and it's a psychological battle. You got to be, very, very strong up here. So playing the long game means, calling somebody today that has no intention of selling for a decade and going and meeting with them, sharing with them a rent study, maybe doing analysis of the building, but not with the intention of selling it, with the intention of showing you, hey, here's where your X is. Right. I'm going to help you get to Y. Here's what we got to do to help you get to Y value. And Y value is, $3 million higher. If you can help somebody improve the value of their property with a clear roadmap, when they get there, they might turn to you and say, hey, that was really helpful. I really appreciate that. Like, I think it's time now. Let's explore options. Right. But the broker that plays the short game is just dialing for dollars, waiting for somebody already selling, trying to make a match, do an off-market open deal. And that's what most of the market is, because that's more exciting. It's more immediate gratification. It's not, you have to see meeting these people as money with a post-dated check on it. Right. And you got to put yourself in that mindset. So I have already kind of written out what I believe I'll make 5 years from now, because I'm looking at my database and my proposal list, and I know that some of these have a quantitative value to them. I just haven't been able to cash the check yet, but the check is there. It's just post-dated.
Got it. Understood. And as far as your ideal client, what do you kind of want them to think and be like? How should they approach the situation?
They shouldn't ask me what the fee is in the first 2
Yeah.
minutes of the transaction. That's usually a tell that this is not
That's
going to
serious.
be a
Yeah.
client that will value a broker, and therefore is probably low probability unless the price is right at that moment in time. Not saying that we can't make those matches, but it's usually somebody that is open-minded, and that with our help has a direction that they want to go.
Mm.
Again, I think the hardest part is figuring out what direction you want to go. And then it's just kind of showing somebody the A, B, C, D multiple choice options of where we're at and where we could go along the way. Typically, an ideal client for us is also somebody that's, looking to transition into something new. Like I mentioned, the rent regulated to net lease. It could be any number of things, but anytime there's some novelty, we can really help because we add a specialty that might not be there already.
Understood. Got it. And as far as people who have bought buildings, what are some creative ways that you've seen owners add value to their buildings?
Oh, so many. I mean, you make your money on the buy,
Yeah.
for sure. But you can also do a number of things along the way. So I think right now it's a very interesting time to look inward and try to reduce operating expenses and improve NOI in the basements. That's how the guys in the 70s and 80s were doing it. They're like, look, all the money was to be made, under the ground, with swapping out the boilers, swapping out the gas lines. So that's one creative way. Two, bring on partners that are accretive to your business. That could, take a number of different forms, but I'm invited into a lot of opportunities because I'm a broker and I have ins and outs. If I'm making a mistake about value, that's probably a pretty big problem. But your chances of overpaying for an asset when I'm involved, they're pretty little, at least in the real time. What else could be a creative way? Look, at the end of the day, you should have a way to improve NOI when you purchase a property.
Have that plan up front.
Yeah, whether interest rates go up and you can capitalize it on it or not.
Right.
There's two ways to make money in real estate. It's to grow NOI or the perception of future value changes. And in New York City, the perception of future value can change on a dime. Rent regulated is a really good example of that. So you might not be able to grow NOI, but if the perception of future cash flows and future NOI changes and your ability to get to that place, value also can change.
Understood. And in 2019, when all the rent stabilized owners kind of were affected, what do you think they can do now to kind of add value to their buildings?
It's tough. I mean, it's very tough. Rent regulated owners are currently in rent revenue prison.
Yeah.
So there is no silver bullet that I can give you right now other than stay politically active. I'm a big believer in rent regulated housing. I personally invested most of my discretionary capital I've allocated in New York City to rent regulated housing because I believe the laws will change. I believe that this is just silly, and eventually common sense and democracy will figure that
Supply and
out.
demand.
Yeah, it'll figure it out. But in the interim, again, harp on expenses. There's a lot of ways to lower, fuel bills now that are coming out, and prepare yourself with a workflow if they are to change laws. If they do, it's going to involve some type of catch.
Right.
De-lead a unit, electrify the heating are two things that I hear a lot about. So prepare yourself for the ability to do that at scale.
Got it.
Combining units is still, an option for people. But they did a pretty good job getting everything.
Right, for sure. And how do you work out how real a buyer or seller really is? Is there a question you like to ask to kind of get a sense of who you're dealing with?
Well, it's two different parts. As a buyer, I mean, a lot of this is built on track record in the marketplace. Brokers communicate with each other. Generally, we're not selling too many properties to rookies.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a high success rate. But a buyer that you'll know when they want something. That's the easy part. They're calling you, they're interacting, they're asking questions. The key question is, do you have your capital lined up, or who is your capital? What bank are you using? You really get into the how are they going to get to the closing table kind of conversations. Where we usually lose a lot of buyers is in the diligence, and everybody's eyes are sometimes bigger than their stomach, and they might have the best intentions of telling me, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy this. But at the end of the day, they are just one part of the overall process. They have to make sure their LPs are on board with it, and they have to make sure that the bank assumptions that they were using check out. So it's tough to navigate how to win a deal from a broker with also making sure that, all of your ducks are in a row. But generally, we like to deal with people that have their own money or have discretionary capital already raised and are not, going around with the hat, deal by deal basis once they have an accepted offer looking for capital.
Right. And as far as sellers, how do you go how do you understand whether or not a seller is actually willing to sell their asset?
Present offers, and you have to present people options. And when you move from a hypothetical to in reality type of option, based upon how they react, will tell you a lot. There's also life conditions. It goes back to the first meeting that we have with them. If we're getting into a conversation of, hey, if we're sitting at this table 2 years from now, what would have had happened in that 2 years to put a smile from ear to ear on your face? Right. And I asked them that question, and they can actually go through, these are what would have happened in that 2 years, Shaun, for me to have a big smile on my face. I have now that roadmap.
I see.
And if we can get into that conversation of a roadmap, I don't need to worry about whether they're a seller in the next 1 or 2 months. Like, I know eventually I'm going to execute on that business plan. And we're like the last thing from a broker that's trying to just jam an offer down someone's throat after I leave you. I'm going to get on the phone and I'm going to tell somebody, I think we should press pause, pump the brakes, keep going, not give up, but also be a little bit patient. There's been macroeconomic changes. We don't need to rush into thinking the world's ending either. Yeah. So you'll always know when you present real informed options, aka offers, clearly outlined with proof of funds, track record. It's one of the biggest mistakes buyers make is just not providing clear feedback. If you're going to take the time to look at a property, provide me an X and Y range that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be a numerical number. So I know that feedback. But if you're just passing or too expensive, that's just a lazy buyer. Right. And you're not going to get the best quality product from the best brokers by just providing feedback. It's better than no feedback. But when I'm introduced as a deal on the principal side, I'm always saying between X and Y, I'm interested. If it gets to X and Y, give me a call, I'll dig in. I'll give you a very clear between X and Y. Right. And that's how you train brokers to work with you, because we get nowhere without feedback.
Understood. And in another one of your videos, you mentioned this concept that clients will not take action without certainty. Yeah. Can you walk us through how you train your new hires to instill this sense of certainty into their meetings with owners?
Yeah, you have to. It's very difficult. I almost think that from the time somebody thinks that they want to sell to when they're actually either hiring a broker or signing a contract is usually a year to year and a half. And now it could be somebody that's just like, I'm selling, but there's still all these unasked, unanswered objections that are usually at play in the back of their head. And they don't even know how to ask these things. So you could say I'm looking to sell until you see the capital gains bill, until you see that transfer tax is 3% in New York City, until you're actually left with what's the net. So that's an unasked, unanswered objection. So your job as a broker is to have these conversations and try to understand what are the areas of uncertainty that we need to help get answered so that you have the confidence to make a decision. And the decision is not always, well, I'm certain if I get this price, I'll sell. It's more like if all of these other aspects are clear and we present market price and we show you without a shadow of a doubt what market price is there anything else that we need to cover? Is there, do all the partners want to sell? Is there, of the 4 partners that own it, all of your brothers and sisters, do some of you want to do an exchange? Oh, okay. Well, we need to set up a tenant in common structure and, change the 1 master LLC to 4 so you can each do your own thing. Okay. That's an area of uncertainty where if you don't know the roadmap, you'll get to an accepted offer and then all of a sudden this will come up and you'll be back at square one. So, a lot of it is just kind of like, I've been doing this so long with pattern recognition. Like, I know the questions that they're not asking. And if I ask them for them, I'm like, you haven't asked me this. They're like, you're good. because there's only so many things, and it's not super complicated what we do. It's just hard to execute on a massive scale. But yeah, you have to know the business well enough to try to flush out those unasked, unanswered questions that the client themselves might not even know that they have at the moment, but that they will eventually come to. And then just, you're not really giving people the certainty necessarily always of a sale price. You're just saying, look, I'm asking for your trust. I will do this job well. I will make the calls. I will push the property out. I will, hold myself to integrity. And I can't guarantee always an exact price, but I can guarantee that at a closing table, or when it comes time to reviewing offers, that you'll know in your gut and in your mind and in your heart that like the highest and best offer in Q1 of 2023 has been flushed out. Whether it's enough to actually execute on, so be it. But our job is just to get to the absolute best price and terms in any moment in time in history. And then if it works out, it works out. But that's all we can do, right?
Understood. Yeah. And how do you remain top of mind with a potential buyer or seller without being pushy?
Sharing some intel that's not always directly related to winning their business. So like comps are a good example. The people that we've done proposals for, and we could do a better job of this, but we might have pitched a property a year ago. Anything that's similar to that property that's sold by us or anybody else or put into contract, you should let them know, hey, here are the metrics. Here's who bought it. Here's why they bought it. Here's how it may compare to yours. Sharing some of that information in a in a direct way, but not in a what's in it for me way. That's a great way to train sellers, educate sellers in the marketplace, because the biggest fear they have is underselling or making the wrong decision. Same thing with a buyer. Right. So the more certainty you can give them through examples that they're not making a mistake, that they are selling for max price, that their contract's not going to get flipped, and on the buyer side, that you're not drastically overpaying. Everyone wants to pay $5 more than somebody else already did. So that's why you get, as a broker, you get tons of emails when it's closed. I would have bought that. No, you wouldn't. You would only buy it once you saw somebody else buy it, because the certainty, or the uncertainty, I should say, of overpaying has now been removed. So a lot of times with buyers too, one of the ways I developed a lot of rapport with them is I don't really concentrate on what's on market. I'm like, I know you want to get there. I know you want to buy, but like, look at our sales report. Let's look at all the properties that we sold in Williamsburg the last 12 months. Tell me which ones you would have bought, because now the price is clear. You can make a very binary decision. I've reviewed the setup. I would have bought these 3 properties. Okay, now as a broker, I know what to send you in the future because I've actually gotten real feedback. Because if I send them that same property, they don't know how to bid. They're more worried about making a mistake than they are taking advantage of opportunity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what's an early career mistake that you'll never make again?
Early career mistake that I'll never make again. I think spending time on too many off markets. I think the easiest way to be a broker is to work off markets. So as a team, we follow the rule of 3s, and they're fun because you get like a hot pulse on something. You feel like you can make a match, but we follow the rule of 3s as far as opens or off markets. You got to know the buyer, meaning you got to know the 1 or 2 top buyers for that particular property in the market at any moment in time. You got to know the top 2. You got to have your fee secured and not just work blind. Just, okay, I'll just trust that the guy's going to pay me later. Have your fee secured, and know the strike price. So if we know the 1 or 2 top buyers for a piece on 275 Canal Street, we have a fee agreement with the seller in place, and we know the strike price and we believe in the strike price, I'll let the guys work on the opens.
Understood.
But if one of those 3 parts of the stool are missing, generally going to be a waste of time.
Got it. Okay. And what are some ways that a commercial broker can kind of set themselves apart? What do you think is an underutilized tool that many people often dismiss?
I think having options for a client on the back end is an underutilized tool, and it's underlearned by brokers. So when you are meeting with people, a lot of times you're not just, again, trying to solve for selling at the highest price and how to get there. They actually have a bigger problem, which is what to do with the proceeds and how to actually, take what they have and make it better, or either solve a life problem with management, or, who they own the property with and going on their own, or it's, any number of things, but you have to have an understanding of the kaleidoscope of investment options out there, so that you can articulate, like, here's, option A, option B, option C, option D, option E, with the money, with the proceeds, all of which solve your goals. Like, now which category do we want to dive into, and then provide them the resources for that. So, the unasked, problem is usually not that I want to sell. We know that it's what do I do with the money? Because giving, 45% of it to the government, I mean, that's why people stay stuck.
Yeah.
They know they want to do something, but they're stuck because they haven't figured out the back end of everything. And our job is to actually, help provide the tools and resources for them to get educated on their own, or help provide those options of what to do on the back end. So, I'm talking to people about tax strategies, refinance strategies, pref equity strategies, anything to solve the underlying problem. And that takes a little while to master. It's a higher level conversation. But if I was a broker, I would be spending a lot more time educating myself on at least enough about the other food groups so I can speak intelligently about it, and putting myself in their shoes. That's probably one of the reasons I'm as successful as I've been so far, is I can really put myself in the client's shoes and just be like, okay, if this is my father, like, what would I be thinking? Right. How would I present these options? And if you can do that, then now you're thinking with them. You're not like an antagonist to their thinking. You're really putting yourself in their seat.
Understood. So you think that most brokers kind of focus on closing the deal, getting out, and moving on to the next deal. But if you take the approach where you close the deal and think about what's happening after the deal, it's going to be way better for you and for the client. You
got to begin with the end in mind.
Right.
So you got to draft the end and then work your way backwards. And that takes a lot more time. It takes, again, it's the long-term play. Right. And you have to educate yourself in that. I think a lot of the marketplace is just a little too, schizo on just trying to like slap something together, but you'll make a couple of those matches, but they're not going to be the higher fees, the high value clients that are really paying you for that extra, right, effort. And, the wealthier somebody is, the more they value their time.
Got it.
So if you can speak to the time aspect of what you're saving people, like, not only am I saving you money because I'm going to get you more than anybody else would, but I'm going to give you back your time. Yeah. And as you get to a certain level in life, that's what's most important. It's not every last dollar. It's like, hey, can I hire Shaun and he get me to a place where I'm making decisions, but I'm not in all the in between, and I'm getting back more of my time. And we've sold some properties, last year in Astoria for people that were in Greece the entire time. I mean, that is a huge value add. He had no problem paying me a big fee because he was able to spend his entire summer in Greece while he had a debt maturity coming due in September, and we were able to get him out, like, he didn't even pay a prepay.
Wow.
Like, that's value for somebody that is wealthy and worked their way up and wants to enjoy their life, not be here like doing a DHCR review with the buyer.
Yeah, definitely. And what advice would you give someone starting in a less than ideal market?
Make it ideal. You can learn any market. I mean, part of what we learn at Marcus Millichap is, if you were to drop me off in Topeka, Kansas, I'd be a dominant broker within that market and, less than 18 months. And it's pretty simple. Pull comps, force your way into the meeting with the top 10 to 12 buyers in that submarket, pound the pavement, just do whatever you got to do, show up at their door and just, camp out, get a meeting with them, ask them very clearly, I see what you bought. Why did you buy it? What are you looking for today? Now you know what the buyers want. Now you go back to the marketplace and find it for them. And through that process, you'll then learn the market, but you got to first know who you're selling to, right, and what they want. So you start with the buyers, and then you go find the product for them. So they say they want to eat mackerel. Okay, we got to go find where the mackerel swim and go find the mackerel, right, hook the mackerel.
Understood. And can you describe to us kind of what New York Multifamily is? What sets the team apart, and what's your kind of long-term vision for this?
New York Multifamily is a team within Marcus Millichap, the New York Multifamily Group. What we do is in our name for branding purposes and just for clarity of mind. Right. So we focus on the $100 million and under, product type, typically multifamily mixed-use development. And then we do a lot of net lease work. So I think we're about 25 brokers total. We all share our information, no Chinese firewalls of any kind. We have a lot of mutually symbiotic split agreements so that, information sharing is, one, lucrative, but also no one's hiding anything. There's no vested interest in hiding anything. because the key to longevity in this business is also a solid database. And so you have 20 years of work going into, honing the right info for people, and logging what offers they made, so that when we list a 100-unit rent regulated building for 220,000 a unit, 9 times the rent roll, and Jackson Heights,
Right.
I can pull a query and show me all the people that have made an offer between 180 and 230 a unit, and between 8 and 10 times the rent roll in the last 36 months. And now I have a list of pre-identified targets and customers that have already pre-identified themselves as a competitor and a buyer in that space. So you take all that out, that's really the synthesis of where the value is just that all those touch points. And people work at big companies, but they don't share information. So then you're really hiring one guy at a big company. That's like the truth of it. So the whole genesis of it is information sharing and kind of cross-pollinating between the boroughs. And my vision for it is to, give every broker on the team the tools to build themselves enough active income, and give them the tools and the understanding to invest on the side to build their own little, I call it a moat of cash flow around your castle.
Right.
And we're in the best business in the world. I mean, this is from a tax efficiency standpoint, from a, how you can make income while learning the craft so that you can actually use that intelligence on your own book. Yeah. There's just every conversation, every meeting has dual purposes. So, that's my dream, is that we continue to grow the top line revenue, and everybody on the team has enough money to continue to invest on their own and or with us to build that cash flow mode and save more on taxes.
Amazing.
Which grows the income even further. So if you get out in front of all these things, it really starts to grow in a profound way.
Understood. That's great. And can you walk us through kind of, let's say someone tomorrow just got hired for New York Multifamily. Can you walk us through, give us a brief overview of the training process for the next 2 years for them?
Yeah, so they start with Marcus Millichap training, which is the best in the business. I know it's the best in the business because people are always trying to poach our guys and girls, year 3 to 5, because we do all the hard work of actually training the business. So Marcus Millichap will give the high level corporate about the company, but also about what we call the broker continuum. And it's a very, it's like an 8-step process, but it's so true. Like George Marcus and Bill Millichap do what they were doing back in 1971. And it just goes through the steps of how you go from calling somebody to the first meeting to the second meeting, all those steps. And the key is, don't skip the steps.
Right.
If you go through the steps in the right order and you don't try to go from 1 to 4, you'll actually have a lot of, guaranteed success. So they do a great job on the fundamentals and, monitoring calls and deal management and all of those type of things, where I come in and I don't really talk to anybody until they're like 3 or 4 months in, and,
right.
They do work a little bit on the database, and, but then I get into the weeds of the New York multifamily side of things, which is heavily nuanced, as and, full of just nothing you're going to read in a book. You gotta actually be doing it. So they get trained on the high level with Marcus, and then we take over. And ultimately, you end up spending more time with people as they get a meeting. The car rides home are where all the training is. Okay, what happened at this meeting? You're learning through osmosis.
Post-game analysis.
Yeah, you got to learn through osmosis. So you just got to get next to somebody that's doing some things, and ultimately when somebody starts, they're just making the meetings. I mean, they'll get there, the client will think that they're meeting a Todd, but then they're meeting Shaun or a Mike. And eventually Todd will know what to say. But in the beginning, it's very simple. You're just kind of the hound dog. You're, kind of roaming through the marketplace, trying to kick up and point at a bird, and then we'll go flush it up and meet them, and we shoot them down. I don't want to say we shoot our clients, but I'm just using the hunting reference.
Yeah. And do you think a broker should start out analyzing deals and moving into originations after that, or start out directly in originations?
I think starting out directly in originations, you should be doing both right away, but I don't really think what you're analyzing until you actually are in the trenches and see the real estate. So, I don't really think that when I get a underwriting back from somebody that hasn't seen the real estate, it's nearly as good as it is if somebody goes and looks at the real estate first and then tries to go analyze the property. Because you learn a lot about the block, about the building, what type of owner you have. You can tell in 2 seconds who's a seller by how they keep things, if they have problems going on in the building. So I think if you're trying to learn the business through an Excel model in the beginning, it's not going to happen. You got to get out there and, have some real life swings and at bats. On the acquisition side, you can certainly, learn it the same way, but you need to go see the physical real estate, unless you're buying loans or something where, maybe it's a little bit more analytical, but I think getting out there and then doing the analyst work is a much better order of operations.
Got it. Understood. And why do you think New York City is the best real estate investment in the world?
It's certainly the most liquid in terms of the most market participants. It's certainly the most fun, or I think it is the most fun. I have a lot more fun. It's just crazy. It's a crazy market where you can have two identical buildings that look basically the same and have two wildly different values. Between rent regulation, where rents are, what kind of boiler, what type of renovations were done in the units. Because, some people can spend X and get a certain amount of rent, or you can go to the moons and get a lot more in rent. So the variety of the housing stock makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You add that with the New York City, just energy and the number of market participants. Like, I'm always shocked at how many people are interested in either being an LP and putting money into a deal, or new buyers that are constantly coming into the market. It's an ever changing thing. Like I said, it's the fifth sport of New York City. It's watched, it's tracked, it's exciting. And, hopefully our headwinds turn into tailwinds. Cause I remember when, 2013 to 17, when the politics weren't completely against us at every turn. It's amazing that the city still does what it does, despite, the government trying to every which way to ruin it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I want to ask, how would you go about learning a new market? If you were dropped into a random market, let's say Wyoming, right? How would you go about becoming the market leader in 1 year? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so similar to my Topeka, Kansas, example, I would pull CoStar. I would see who are the top 10 to 12 buyers in the Wyoming market for what I want to do.
Right.
Where is their office? What is their number? Call them. Hey, I'm a young, hungry broker. I don't know anything, but I guarantee you I'm going to find you a great deal.
Right.
In the next 12 months. Give me 5 to 10 minutes of your time. I will cut myself out at 10 minutes. I just want to know what you're looking for, and then I'll go find it for you. I'm coming to your office in 20 minutes.
Amazing.
If they don't answer the phone 20 minutes later, I'm just showing up at the office, waiting outside the door for someone to show up. Get that meeting, figure out what they're looking for, right? And then you just go back to your database and call the people that have what they're looking for, and then start even in the beginning. Off markets are a little bit okay to do because you're learning a lot. You're getting some insights into market feedback that you wouldn't get if you were just asking somebody for a 6-month exclusive that they're never going to give it to you. But you start with the customer. Same thing with buying a property. When you're buying a property, you should know, who am I selling it to once I execute my plan? Start there and then see if it works. But you got to begin with the end in mind in a lot of things in life. But that's how you do it. And that's not how people do it. You have to be creative, playful, and funny enough to get those meetings with these top 10 guys and be humble enough to say what I just said. And, I don't know anything, but that's specifically why you should meet with me, because I'm going to get opportunities. I'm going to get at bats.
And you're honest with them.
I want to pitch them to you. And you're going to tell me a little bit about what you like and don't like, but that's why I want to meet with you for 10 minutes. I know where I'm starting, and that's how I used to close buyers. I used to just be super humble, and that turned into relationships with 5 to 10 guys, and I still have those, where those are the 7, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. calls, and that's when they teach you the business. Kids are put away. Okay, you sent me 5 rent rolls today. Let's go through them one by one. I know this deal sucks for these 3 reasons. This one's kind of interesting, but this is where it should be priced. Okay. Those are invaluable touch points for a broker, because then you can go pitch the property correctly and hopefully make a sale. Yeah. But you begin with the customers, the buyers, and then go find what they're looking for.
Understood. Perfect. And in what situations in business do you listen to your gut and intuition more than you'd use logic and reasoning?
I mean, certainly when buying properties, there's a gut feel to a lot of things about the tenancy, about
Mm,
the condition of the property, about who would see the same things that I'm seeing in the future, or how
mm,
I can position it better. Um, I listen to my gut a lot about the people I want to spend time with,
mm,
in terms of the ideal client aspect of things. Um, but I use my head and logic a lot too. Like, part of my job as team leader is to quote unquote see the future. So, I can see the obstacle that's going to block us, down the field. So now I know better than to even go down the field. And,
mm,
when someone brings in a listing, I'm looking up all the ways, all the landmines that are going to explode on us later.
mm.
Like, let's go try to explode those landmines now and figure out if there's actually a path to get down the field. So, a lot of it is through a lot of heartache and failed transactions, knowing what's going to get in the way, which a lot of people in the business for 5 or 6 years, unless they've experienced those things, they don't know that this little technical problem, if
Mm.
it's not resolved, or we don't have an answer to the question that will come up at contract signing, if we don't have an answer for that, like, don't even start. So it's definitely, you got to have a little bit of both, gut on who you're going to work with and what feels good, but also you got to use your brain and be thinking ahead.
Got it. Understood. And can you tell us about a deal where you kind of had to think creatively and had to step out of your kind of job title and do things outside of your job description to close a deal?
Well, I don't think my job description
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really
is
have.
scanning copies of deregulation paper from 10 years ago, but I've definitely had some, that ZT Realty portfolio, $76 million. I just remember we worked all weekend just copying things, digitizing it, arguing with attorneys about what's relevant and what's not. Um, but I will say, like, I think everything falls in the job description. The
Mm,
job is to get the property sold.
right.
So, and the guys in the team know this about me, and I will still be humble enough to get down to the very, low trenches of, the stuff that sucks the most, and solve that, as I am, going and just doing the martini shake and pitch,
Right.
on the $50 million development site or whatever. So you got to be, and I think that's the same all the way in a lot of, the people I look up to. Like, they're not afraid to go down to the lowest job title and work that angle if that's what it takes to get the property sold or
Get the deal closed.
refinanced,
Yeah.
or you gotta do it all, and you
Right.
gotta be willing to do it all, be humble enough to do it all, and not think any type of work is above you, or below you, I should say. Do what you should and stay in your lane, but also, like, go down where it's needed to get the job done.
100%. Yeah. And what was your biggest missed opportunity?
There's a lot of properties that I could have probably bought if I had um, the willingness to ask people for money. I didn't want to do that ever, including my parents. It's hard to ask people for
Yeah.
money. You got to really believe in yourself and believe in the property, and also just know that it's okay,
Yeah.
to make a mistake, but if you feel like it's good, I just think there's a lot of things that came across my desk that I would have done differently. Um, so that's what sticks out the most. But I'm sure there's many.
Right. Got it. And how do you go about setting goals for yourself and for your team?
So for myself, I like kind of have 4 buckets. So I just do a little one of
Quadrants?
these, and pretty much the 4 buckets that involve all categories of life. If someone can find the fifth, I'd be shocked. But the categories are career, finance, well-being, and relationship.
Mm,
And so of those 4 buckets, I start bullet pointing. These are the things I want to, accomplish in those buckets. So finance might be, growing the passive income by another 20,000 a month,
mm,
or, reducing federal adjustable grossable income tax to zero. Career could be, doubling the revenue of these particular guys. Well-being, the trips you want to go
mm,
on, the, 5 pounds you want to lose, the core muscle strength you want to add. And relationship, whatever that means to you, establish a better relationship with your sister, mother, girlfriend, wife, be a better parent. So I just break things down to those 4 categories, and whether I accomplish them on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis, that's kind of the rubric that I use. And
mhm.
I ask the team to do the same thing. If they want to share theirs with me, great. I'll share mine back, and we can kind of hold each other accountable. But on a strictly financial, numerical sense, you know, progress is happiness. It's another Tony Robbins quote. So, my job is to just keep revenue going up. if somebody can make more money than they did the year before, chances are they're going to stick around and, feel good about themselves because they're progressing, at least on a revenue side. Hopefully they're progressing on an intellectual and educational side as well. But, I don't really watch my personal income all that much. I watch what the income is of everybody, kind of that's in my umbrella. And as long as they're progressing and tracking the right way, chances are I'll end up where I want to be.
Perfect. Amazing. And you mentioned earlier that you went to the gym today at 5:30 a.m.
Yeah.
How important has the gym been in kind of instilling this sense of discipline in your life?
I mean, it's a key component of just clearing the mind. It's, again, whether I'm making significant progress on the physical side of things, just sweating it out. I have a lot of ideas when I run the marketplace. Like all of a sudden I'll see a building, I'll remember to call this person, I'll remember what they wanted, I'll have an idea for something. So there's a lot of those aha moments of connecting the dots that, to me at least, occur while exercising, and I write them down. So I don't really think of the exercise as like a trade-off to work. It is work.
Yeah.
Especially if you're thinking or you're listening to YouTubes or, watching something inspirational. I try to learn, while I'm exercising. Right. So it's not really a trade-off to work. It's just another part of work. Right. So, that's, it really helps with what I have to do today, which is basically resuscitate contracts that, as a broker, when you put something in contract, you kind of this is money made. It's a hard contract, quote unquote, hard contract. And you're looking forward. When we just experienced what we experienced, I do have certain properties that are on contract that the value has dipped or, pulled back in excess of the deposit, which makes the buyer a little squirmish, and they're trying to see if they can get the price lowered and yada, yada. So it's not a fun place. It's a little bit more enjoyable now that I worked out this morning.
Right.
I'm not so angry.
And what do you look for in a new hire?
Just somebody that I do not look for like a 4.0 GPA from Harvard. You're too smart, you're going to get in your own head, stay in your head, you're dead. I look for somebody that, has a lot of drive, or a lot of, I don't know, it's hard to, just a lot of hunger, and it doesn't always come across as just like a pound your chest hunger.
Right.
I usually ask them who they look up to and why, and I try to channel in what are the attributes of that person that they look up to, and I want to understand what they're doing it for. And if they say the right things for that, and it's usually not, I want to make a bunch of money because I want to spray champagne bottles all over my friends at the club. That ain't gonna work. That's the guy that chases the off market, deal and just never gets anywhere. Yeah. If it's, I think having a debt obligation, I had one to my dad. I had to pay him back every cent that I, used to finance my existence in New York City, making zero income for 2 years. That was a huge motivation to me, probably the biggest motivation. I didn't care about myself. I needed to pay that money back. Right. So you kind of look for why somebody's here and doing it. And it becomes kind of a little, that's where I use my gut, going back to your previous question, more than anything. They got to have hunger. They got to have certain amount of intelligence. And sometimes you don't know until somebody gets on the phone. I've had, college football players that are linebackers come in and say that they're going to, hit the phones hard, blah, blah, blah. They hit the phones hard for a week, and then they just can't handle the rejection.
Right.
So it's very difficult. It's very easy to do this job for a month or two, or even a year. Very hard to keep the energy levels up for a decade, day in, day out, and, train yourself like an athlete and take that action and rejection, action, rejection, action. And it's easy to do in your head. It's very hard to do in reality. So I've definitely been wrong, and, on the, benefit of some people, and some people have surprised me. Other people have surprised me for the worst.
Got it.
But underline it again, going back to that, begin with the end in mind. Tell me what your ideal, situation is when you hit 30. And what does that look like? So for me, that was explaining to my dad, you're going to give me this loan of $3,000 a month, $1,500 for rent, $50 a day for toothbrushes and all kinds of stuff. But the payoff to you is I'm going to be able to go see the Detroit Lions football game with you on a moment's notice, and you're not going to have any liabilities paying myself, so just give me this last little bit of confidence. And, explained the payoff. And that was really what drove me to have that ultimate flexibility and live life on, my terms.
Great. Amazing. And what idea do you believe about a specific market or asset class that many people you respect disagree with you on?
Rent regulated property.
Okay.
I mean, it's a gamble. There's currently very little way to raise revenue.
Yeah.
Personally speaking, that's what I've invested most into New York City. And I understand it because, the herd is all flowing where capital flows, and capital wants returns in the first 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
And they want also something to do. So they want a free market property that they can raise the rents on from, $2,000 a month to $5,000 a month. Whether there's enough of that to go around, but I do think, we're 3 years into June of 2019. Yeah. So almost 4 years, 3.5 years since they changed the laws. I think that there's enough political talk. Maybe it doesn't happen this legislative session, but I will make the bet, and I have, that in the next 3,
Okay.
and I'm 37, I'm a young guy, I can wait, that there'll be some type of shift in unlocking these units from rent revenue prison. And maybe that landlords aren't treated as the obstacle, but
Right.
really the caretakers and the custodians of property that make up the fabric of society in New York City, that there will be some type of shift. And that's where I go to that second point. Like, you can either, to make money, you can grow NOI, or the perception of future value can change. And so when you're buying something that is below replacement costs, far below replacement costs, currently not in fashion, not in vogue, in a supply constrained market, those are 3 kind of criteria for a contrarian bet that almost always pays off in the long term.
Right.
So when I think about what that contrarian bet looks like in New York City, what's in a supply constrained market, far below replacement costs, and currently not in fashion, and that's rent regulated housing. Now, you can't buy just everything. Like, expenses can eat you up alive, but the right properties, you might, buildings right now, $1,000 average rent are, really priced on like current cash flow. None of this future upside is priced in because it doesn't exist legislatively. All of a sudden that mechanism changes. What you had to sell at a 6 cap can go to a 5 cap without even moving, the dial at all. And there's value that's inherently created in that change of future value perception.
Got it.
So look, for me personally, I'm brokering deals today. I actually like a business plan where I don't have to do anything. I can just buy it, put it on the shelf, low leverage, just wait for the business plan to unveil itself to me. So I think that is, the end of the day, one of the best risk-adjusted trades, but you have to get yourself and your partners into the bet that you believe the laws will change. It's a binary thing. If you get that assumption wrong, your investment will never pan out. And then 2, just be okay with this might take, 5 to 10 years, but how do we not have a 2-3x equity multiple within a decade? So, some people are better off, going for the, 5 3x's in 3 years. And if they hit on 5, great, and lose their shirt on another 5, maybe they're still in a better place. Overall, I just don't like losing principal. And I know eventually, like, there's just no way that these things could be worth any less than they're worth right now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And who do you learn from at this point in your career?
The clients still. Yeah. I mean, you don't know it all, and that's kind of what makes it interesting.
Right.
I mean, there's still people I'm going to interact with this week that I've never met before. And if I do a little research on them and try to earn, right now I'm very interested in just, single family renovation, because I bought a couple places out in Montauk for, single family rental purposes. So I'm kind of getting more interested in the construction aspect and the construction cost aspect of things. And that's where I'm just kind of finding some personal curiosity right now. But the whole development angle in general, I could sell development sites. I can walk you through my assumptions on what I think hard and soft costs are going to be and what the NOI is going to be at the end. But I generally am not going line by line and understanding what, concrete superstructure costs. And, and right now that's interesting to me because I'm selling a number of development sites. So I still think at the end of the day, you don't need to pay NYU. Sorry, I know you're probably paying them a big tuition or paid them a big tuition. I paid BU a big tuition. You don't need to go to school to get that. The professors that own buildings, those are who are going to teach you the business. Yes, it's a great background, but this job, I always tell people, you may not get paid in the beginning, but you're getting a $200,000 a year education as long as you apply yourself and you go meet people and mix it up with people. So if you look at it that way, you know, there's a lot of people in this world that are in the New York City marketplace with net worths in the, you know, 8 and 9 figures that, you know,
didn't go to.
No.
Got it. Understood. And what's your primary driving factor nowadays? Is it money, personal achievement, family, philanthropy?
I mean, I want to be able to give back. I'm probably admittedly somewhat selfish to a certain extent right now, because I know I want to be extremely gratuitous later in life, and I want to compound what I have so I can really make a dent, you know, kind of later. I certainly want to make my fiance proud, and she reminds me, you know, kind of every day. And she's just a North Star. I mean, she's like the light of my life. So definitely don't want to disappoint her, want her to be proud of who she decided to be with. I don't have a family yet, but I've always thought like I'm doing this all for, and I have them very crystal clear in my brain, you know, future posterity. And I want to be able to look at them, and I've actually made some videos that I'm going to show them later in life, expressing on my 37-year-old self, like how much I'm doing, but I'm thinking of them while I'm doing it, just so when they're being brats at 15, I can plug it into the tape and maybe like show them like, hey, here's your dad, like not when he's an old dad, like speaking to you directly and truthfully while he's, you know, got 3, you know, shirts he had to take off from sweating in dirty basements every day. And then, you know, from a personal standpoint, it's really, net worth is nebulous to me. I could care less about that. It's really just providing that moat of cash flow around the castle. So I want to build this, you know, to a level where, you know, I don't have to worry if I passed away that, you know, my family and, you know, children will be taken care of just through the passive income that, you know, the properties receive. And ultimately that's, I have my little sheet that I look at probably more than any other document of the passive cash flow that are coming in, what's going on per property. And I'm just trying to grow that as much as possible. So everything I do is designed with minimizing taxes to put more money into real estate or other, you know, dividend paying, you know, opportunities, so I can grow that, you know, make that moat wider.
Amazing. Great. Amazing. And Shaun, I have my final question to wrap this up. What advice would you give your 22-year-old self about life, business, and relationships?
22-year-old self about life, probably don't sweat the small stuff as much as you have. You know, life is full of disappointments, but there's a lot of wisdom in the things that don't go your way, and to pay attention to those and take it for what it's worth, but don't, you know, let it affect your state. Because we have a, you know, beautiful thing that we get to do every day called living, and it's just don't take it for granted. What I would give my advice to a 21-year-old in terms of business is probably an even greater emphasis on making the relationships, you know, going out of their way. I do play the long game, but I could play an even longer game. And, you know, the whole business, you can have knowledge, but knowledge in and of itself doesn't do anything. Knowledge married with relationships equals opportunity. So I did pretty well in both those buckets, but if I had that equation, you know, on my refrigerator every single day, on top of, you know, not sweating the small stuff, I think I'd be a little bit further along. It's more of a question of what am I going to be telling my 37-year-old self when I'm 47. And it's probably, if you're out there looking, go all in on 2023. This might be an opportunity to kind of throw a dart at the board. And as long as you're not stupid, you know, values have been affected. Cap rates are up. If you believe interest rates are going to go down, you shouldn't worry about your leverage return. You should buy quality properties at in-place yields that historically have never been around. And, you know, play the long game. But I do think this is an opportunity when there's a lot of uncertainty in the market to buck the trend and go, you know, it's more money, more cash in today, but it's also more money cash out once things turn around and interest rates drop and cap rates compress. So we're in a moment of time. Usually it's a little bit smaller of a window than people expect. You know, COVID was a perfect example. There was a window in time, very, very small, to buy, you know, mixed use retail when no one was giving credit for any retail projections. Everyone was putting zero, banks giving zero. But that moment didn't last long, because as soon as everybody sees that we're past the hump of the pain, everyone rushes in again. The herd follows. And then you're just competing with 10 more people than you otherwise wouldn't have, where right now, you know, there's really only 2 to 3 active purchases that are really hunting a deal to the level that's required to actually make the transaction. So you have a lot of fluff out there, but you got to, as a purchaser, as an investor, like figure out the relationships you're going to work on specifically, or really go for a deal and don't always worry about, is this the best deal ever? Worry about, is this a good deal for 2023? Because it's the deal that I have in front of me. Yeah. And comparison is the thief of joy. So.
Okay, great. Shaun, this has been super valuable, and there's so much that people can apply to their lives moving forward. Thank you again for doing this. Really appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
Great.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Cool. That's fun.
Yeah, it was super fun.